You are comfortably zoned with me, the Zigzag Man, in Alameda, California. I am fighting the unholy trinity, big business, government, and organized religion. I am back. You are comfortably zoned with me, the Zigzag Man, in Alameda, California, flying high over the zone today. And we're in Alameda, as I say, I'd say 9 miles from San Francisco, right over the bay in Northern California. And it's the East Bay in the United States of America, to all of those out there in internet land. I have a great guest. His name is Monty Heying. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Monty.
It's Heying, but that's all right.
All right, that's 1 for 2. Okay, Monty, I got right.
Yeah.
All right, so you got to give me some credit. Monty is the newest hero in Alameda, and he's a hero to the majority of folks who are renters. And if anybody has followed this along the way, especially here on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, I've, over the past 2 years, have touched bases with the leaders of the Renters Coalition in Alameda, who are trying to achieve what Monty seems to have done, which is put a rent stabilization initiative on the ballot, and we get to vote for it in November. And I want to know from you, before I find out a little bit about how we got to this point, when did you get into the action at the Renters Coalition, and when did you realize that it's almost a miracle to get these many signatures to put it on the ballot in this short period of time?
Yeah, you're right. A miracle is an understatement. It was an extreme. I had no idea how hard it would be.
Okay.
And let me preface my comments by saying I do not speak for the coalition. I'm pretty much speaking, just on my own behalf, because I don't really have authority to speak for the coalition. But I'm happy to address anything, as an individual.
I want to know what you've done along the lines of putting the signatures together, and when did you realize it, and was anybody else? I know Jason Buckley, who's been on the show before, has played a big part in it, and Tristan Schmidt, and a whole bunch of folks. But you've really taken the lead along these lines. And what?
I just caught fire. I grew up in an orphanage. And when I learned that there was a meeting, the coalition called a meeting at my church, Christ Church here in Alameda, Episcopal Church. Someone said, it's about rent problems, rent crisis. And I said, hey, that's important. I just showed up. But anything that has to do, when I started hearing what people were talking about, I just caught fire. I identified with the kids, the high school kids and junior high over there by 470 Central who were getting displaced. I mean, I just exploded, sort of internally, and came alive and jumped in wherever I felt like I could help or saw a need, and just
you took it from there.
I've never done anything like this, and I was inspired.
I was just going to ask you, do you have any experience? I know you were a Marine. I don't know if that was voluntarily. Was it during the Vietnam era?
Yeah, I'm a Vietnam era ex-Marine. I didn't go active. I was in the reserves. We were on 3-day mobilization alert for about a month during that time frame, but that was the worst part. We had our IDs cut, orders cut, everything was ready to go, but we didn't get. We got passed over. Our helicopters were too old.
Right. And this was in Texas?
Yes, right, Dallas, Naval Air Station, Dallas, Texas, right.
Ah, okay. So you kind of lucked out. Were you going to school at the time, or?
I was in college, right? Exactly.
Pardon me?
Yeah, I was in college. Yeah, University of Texas
okay.
Arlington at the time, right?
So you weren't going to be drafted or anything like that?
No.
Good. Well, what brought you to California, and then we'll talk about the renter thing.
Yeah, my business, my company, Occidental Petroleum, moved me out here, and I met a girl and raised two daughters. You know, I grew to like the area, and then eventually really appreciate it. You know, I was quite frankly a Reagan Republican when I moved to California. I was a right winger.
Oh.
And
now you'd be right at home the way things are. Hillary is a Reagan Republican, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, right. But I because of the Rodney King beatings, triggered members of my own beatings at the orphanage. I suddenly found myself just swinging over and being sympathetic with the people who are, how do I say, exploited and the vulnerable and the exploited population. And
you're very special. You could have reacted in many different ways, given your background of having been, in your words, beaten in an orphanage.
Right.
Did you see other folks of your compadres, so to speak, turn out in a different manner?
Oh yeah, it's not pretty. This is an example. I reconnected with Bobby Hood. I saw Bobby get the worst beating you can imagine. I wrote a story about it. It's been published online, I lost track with all those guys, and so 50 years later, I reconnect with Bobby. I was looking for him because I'd seen, what happened to him. I wanted to see if he was okay or how he turned out, and he was in a assisted living facility in Barre, Vermont, 3,000 miles away. Long story short, I spent a chunk of money and flew to Barre, and after talking with him several months on the phone, and he was a mess. He was paranoid, had been a drug user. He was still a heavy marijuana user.
Oh,
and
at least there's an upside.
Yeah, he ended up within 2 years he was dead. He contracted. He was in poor health. Contracted the pneumonia, and within his pastor at his church contacted me, and through the internet, thank God for Facebook, I reconnected him with all five of his with his three sisters and all five of his children. All six of his children got to see him before he died, and a couple of them had never had any contact with him, had no memory of him. And Bobby was a mess. I saw him get a horrific beating. His parents beat him. His foster father, after his mother remarried and came back and got him at the home, adopted him. He also beat him. He went in the Marine Corps. He was a Vietnam era veteran as well. And I was
certainly an indication of how you step up and help not only the community in this case, but individuals.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't explain what happened to me. For something wiring in my brain enabled me to, some would say, overcome. But I processed the memories. I've had an immense amount of therapy. Thank God for the VA. And the therapy's been effective. I spent a ton of time. I was never incarcerated. I never got in trouble with the law or anything. But I've always been drawn to helping and you might say rescuing. Although I don't do it on purpose. It just comes out of me. I don't go around trying to be a hero.
That's pretty good and pretty cool. And on behalf of the renters, not just the coalition, but all the renters that don't even know about the coalition, don't have any idea yet what you're going to do.
You wait. You wait.
I know, because when this gets now that it's on the ballot, the word, you guys are going to spread the word, and the overwhelming majority of folks are going to vote for it. But what is it exactly that we're voting for? This is it's not rent control. It's deliberately not named rent control. They use the expression rent stabilization. Now, is that within reason? Are there numbers that it can go up? Just can't go up as drastically? You give me an idea of what's being put on the ballot, because you're the guy that answered the question when many people came up to you to sign. You were out there at Safeway, all over the place. I mean, how many? Hundreds and hundreds of folks. Yeah. What did you tell them if they asked you a question?
Yeah, it was simply put, it's a ballot measure which puts rent stabilization on the ballot in November, and lets people vote. And the primary features are it ties rent to a rational basis, rent increases to a rational basis. Instead of just raising rents however they want, willy-nilly, and letting the market redefine the composition of the city, the rents are 65. Rent increases would be no more than 65% of the consumer price index, and they'd be able to be raised once a year. Plus, there would be a reward.
How would you break that down? Let's assume that was in effect 2 years ago.
Right.
What would be the ramifications of that, had it been in effect, the ramifications today to Johnny Lunch?
I'll give you a real life example.
For a living.
Yeah, somebody bought the house next door, 2 buildings next door, and within less than 2 years, the rents had been almost doubled, and all the people were gone that I knew that had lived there. So the community was, ripped apart,
Right, of course. And that's
what would have happened?
Who had to go out of school, change schools in the middle of the school term.
Oh, yeah.
It's horrendous.
For a 7-year-old boy, his mother, Erin, was a flight attendant. 7 years old. He'd been there 4 years. That's the only home he remembered. That was his home.
Right.
So had this measure been in place, they could not have raised the rent more than 2%. So instead of
more than 2%.
Right. Instead of 100% increase, so instead of going for 1,200.
Now, what opposition? You must be getting an incredible amount of opposition from the landlords. The landlord called.
It's interesting. I'd say the
interesting name that they give the person who collects the rent, landlord. Give me a break. I mean, just that in itself makes it a class thing, and it infuriates me. But go ahead.
Yeah, it's there's a minority of quote unquote landlords, I think, who get off on the idea of it's a power trip for them. It's the vast majority of landlords that we spoke to, that spoke to me during the 8 weeks of petitioning and 2 months of going to city council meetings. The vast majority that I spoke with are good people, and they realize that we've got to have this, that the community has been torn apart in the past 3 years. And
well, when you say the vast majority of landlords, how about the vast majority of the landlords that control, say, 20% of it, like Gallagher and Lindsay, those people?
Yeah, Gallagher and Lindsay.
What kind of opposition are you getting from these folk?
Oh, yeah. I think it was Don Lindsay who, of course, I heard him speak, at the city council meeting, but I think it was him. I think I recognized him when I first started petitioning at Safeway at Alameda Landing. and he was pretty. He was kind of spitting fire, you know. He was saying things like it's criminal. It's criminal.
It's criminal wanting to stay in where you were born and raised and not be forced out.
Yeah, you got it. Right.
Isn't that criminal? Can you imagine that?
Can you imagine it? Yeah.
Yeah. So we could displace you and put somebody else in there, maybe fix it up a little bit, put some tile in, maybe recarpet, and double the rent.
Right.
You know that.
There's a standard practice that I say again. This is my sampling. I've talked to hundreds of renters over the past 8 weeks, and a large percentage of complaints had to do with landlords failing to maintain the property and do repairs and so forth. And what they do is they stonewall on repairs, hoping that the tenant, him or herself, will get frustrated and pay for the repairs themselves. And that's exactly what they do. And then
in turn, when they accrue the bill, maybe have the plumber come over, this, that, and the other thing, get the bill, do they send it to the landlord, or are they afraid to send it to the landlord for fear that they'll be evicted with no cause? Now, that's another thing. Does this initiative that's going to be put on the ballot that is a rent stabilization, does that include evictions without cause? Is there going to
Absolutely. There's a lot of, that's another thing. The vast majority of tenants that I spoke with are concerned about landlord retaliation. That is a big fear.
Right. I mean, as if they would, but, you know.
Yeah.
May happen, huh?
Yeah, well, no, I have examples. We'll get all these up on the web.
I'm absolutely shocked, Monty, but give me a few examples.
Oh, gosh, there was a woman, she didn't say her name on Facebook, but I think it was Erin, the lady who was kicked out here, but she got a place somewhere else. And the landlord there increased the rent, $500, and she complained about it, and, she cut it back to $400. Well, that was still, like a 50% increase. And she asked the landlord if she could, if her boyfriend could move in and help out with the rent. And the landlady said no. And yet, in the same complex, there were many other units of the same size which had, 3 or more people in it, 2 adults and children and so forth. So she was being, in effect, punished for, complaining and getting her rent reduced. And the landlady hopes that she'll, give up and move, and she can rent it to somebody else at a higher price.
Unbelievable. I mean, not unbelievable, but shocking nonetheless.
Yeah.
Quite believable. And we're talking about humans. These aren't just numbers and statistics, and there's displaced humans. And when you have to move, or when you move, even under the best of circumstances, it takes a lot of adjustment, a lot of stress. Oh. Unfortunately, this happens all too often to elderly folks. I mean, not just old people. You could be old and it's all great, I know. But once and when the time comes that they become elderly, then it really isn't all that great. And elderly folks are being forced to find new places to shop, new places to worship, new places to all these things that go into moving. It's just the intangible things that you can't be compensated for by just a few bucks. Here, we'll give you a few bucks, moving expenses. But
I had a lady call me, 83 years old. She'd moved down to Southern California for 2 years to be with her kids, and then that didn't work out, and she wanted to move back. Well, that was during the wrong 2 years, because during that 2 years, things doubled, and she couldn't afford to live here anymore. 83 years old. This is where she lived most of her life, 50 years of her life. This is where her friends are. She can't move back into town because of the cost. The rents have gone up. This is where, she lived. This is her home.
That's horrible.
But again,
you didn't really answer the question. Predominantly, are the major landlords like Gallagher and Lindsay, I just don't want to pick on them. The others too, they are violently opposed to this. What are they doing? Is it a wink and nod? Are they going to be going to their tenants and say, wait a second, this is what it doesn't include and blah, 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 and if this goes through, you're not going to be able to get the services and the upgrades. How are they combating it so far?
Well, there was a guy who showed up the last day of petitioning with a clipboard. See, all of our clipboards are identical. We use a distinctive font, type font, which prints a sign on the back of it which says Rent Control, City of Alameda, and it's taped onto the clipboard in blue, and using blue tape. This guy shows up with he's 10 paces away from us, the Safeway, and he's got an identical clipboard, except it says no Rent Control, City of Alameda, but it's taped with the same blue tape and uses the same type font that we had. That's kind of a dirty, but, it goes well beyond that. They say that, housing values will go down, real estate values will go down, and that people won't maintain their property because there won't be enough money. And, we all know. I can point a block away is a house that's never, an old Victorian. It's never been maintained. It's been rented out under no rent control for the past, 30 years. But it's not.
Nobody paints it or anything on the outside?
Pardon me?
Does anybody paint it on the outside and keep the bushes up and the shrubbery,
it's severely deteriorated. I haven't done a study on it, but my explanation is that there's a lot of landlords, or some anyway, who just live off the cash flow. They're not business people. They don't keep a reserve for maintenance. But when something comes up that needs to be done, they pay for it and then increase basically they make the tenants pay for it by increasing upping the rent, rather than maintaining, as a business person would do, a maintenance reserve.
And let's be fair, there's also a lot of well-intended, good landlords out there who have fair agreements with a couple of 3-4 tenants.
Absolutely.
And everybody's happy, and they
don't go
dungas to raise the rent every 15 minutes.
Right.
So, keeping it into proportion. How about local publicity? Did you get, say, the Alameda Sun to be very happy for you guys? Or
the Alameda Sun has been the only newspaper that really, consistently, we submitted a lot, to both papers, the Sun and the Alameda Journal. But the Sun fairly regularly would publish something we wrote. I've had several op-ed pieces and letters to the editor published there, as have others.
Right.
But I finally got a letter to the editor published just this week, actually, last Wednesday. They did publish one, and I was quite pleased about it. The timing couldn't have been better.
Yeah, well, there was a landlord or a tenant or somebody wrote in, she said, and I quote, I have met many landlords, and they are all wonderful people. And I said, well, that's interesting. It's all how you judge wonderful people, too.
Well, that too, but there are a vast, I still say 80% or so of the landlords are really good people. And I'd
say that 99% of the major landlords, the ones that control the major amount of property in this city, are just the opposite. That's just my opinion. And
well, no.
Pardon?
Yeah, you have Gallagher and Lindsay, which is the large property management company. They, as you say, hold sway over a vast number of properties.
Right.
And, yeah, you're right.
And yes, absolutely. And so It's all how you compile the statistics. And
well, here's the other thing: is I'm a retired CPA and former CFO. I know the numbers. Right. I've done the numbers. I did an analysis on 470 Central, and they're making plenty of money off of that place.
Well, that's America. They're entitled to make money, and they're entitled to make money without gouging.
Exactly. They were gouging.
There's a difference. Capitalism is wonderful. It's the greed in capitalism that messes it all up. So and that's what the first thing, well, aren't we entitled to this? Yes, you are. Absolutely. But you're not entitled to change the face of the community and not have the community do something to make it impossible for you to do business here.
Yeah, I'm going to do a PowerPoint presentation. I've done a beautiful, spreadsheet on all this, real estate analysis on 470 Central, and I'm going to do a presentation, make a PowerPoint out of it, and take it to the Chamber of Commerce and see if I can get them to put me on their agenda because there's the truth needs to be told. This has an economic impact. There are people who are making it outrageous.
Well, I don't think the Chamber of Commerce is the way you ought to start it. I mean, that's it, going to them. You have to know that the Chamber of Commerce is supported by the business.
I know. But I don't mind walking into the Lion's Den. I mean, I can hold my own.
Okay. Well, if you can get their support, then I think that would help. Yeah, and you don't mind going into the Lion's Den. That's what I appreciate about that. Big decision to move from Texas. You happy you moved to California, where at least you can argue?
Well, yeah. I'm on Facebook. All my Facebook friends, more than half of them are from Texas, and my old high school buddies. They just shake their heads at some of this quote unquote liberal stuff that comes out of me. But the last signature I got at 8:00 in the evening, a guy drove up and handed my clipboard, and he signed, and he said, when the landlords asked me to sign their petition, he said, I asked them, what would Jesus do? And I said, well, what'd they say? He said, nothing. He said, they just got mad. And that's really what we're talking about. These people, I grew up in it's a Bible Belt, and the people that I grew up with, I don't know how they can call themselves, religious or Christians, and have these horrible views about, capitalism and rent control, things of that sort. Because, nowhere in the Constitution is free market capitalism mentioned. I'm sorry, that's something that grew on its own.
Well, nowhere in the Constitution. We're not supposed to have a mixture of church and state as well, which is another problem. Do you have any views on the tax exemption that all churches, synagogues, and mosques receive? Can you see from a social standpoint that?
Well, it's exploited. I know that
coming into the community to take care of schools, fire department, all these things that we need. We could educate the poor, and we could educate the curious and feed the poor if we could get rid of the tax exemption. Could that be your next goal? Would you do that for me, the man?
I would think about it. I would think some adjustment needs to be made because I do know, the Mormon Church, for example, has huge for-profit holdings.
You can't get me started on how much money is wrapped up. And you say Mormon, I say Catholic. There's untold amount of money, and we can go right here in Alameda, if you want to talk about the landlords. The Catholic Church owns a lot of property here in Alameda.
Oh, I know. They own those shops along Ensenada where the where the Blue Dot coffee shop is.
Yeah, and what do they call that? The Gold something? What district is that?
Well, the Gold Coast is Central.
Okay, let's talk about all that property.
Yeah,
I want to tell you a little story, because you may not remember this a couple of years ago, maybe 3 now.
Right.
The city of Alameda had a grant program going on, right, where businesses that qualified, and there were only so many of them that they can give out, could get a grant to refurbish the front of their businesses, the facades.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah, it's right around the corner from me. They did that, right?
Wasn't it nice? Well, you know what the Catholic Church did? They own a lot of property.
Right.
They had the nerve, and they pay no property taxes whatsoever.
Right.
And their little business, not business, it's a school. Well, it's a business. It's like Good and Plenty. It's both, right? Good and Plenty.
Cool, yeah, right.
That is an incredible moneymaker. They pay no taxes on that. And that's okay. That's okay. It's the way it is, the way it's always been. That's why I want you to change this for me, Monty. Okay.
Yeah,
so I got to tell you the story. They're giving out these grants, and who applies? And with the blessing of city government, and this is not in this administration, this is in the previous Ganoffs. Do you remember from SunCal and all that?
Sure, I remember that, yeah.
You hear that then?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of money went out the window there, too. But the Catholic Church applies for grants to refurbish buildings that they are making buku bucks on and not paying taxes to the city. Guess what? They get the grants. My gosh. Here's another story about the Catholic Church in the last few years, St. Joe's and all those folks, here in Alameda, surprisingly enough, because that's what we're talking about.
Right.
There's a little place where all the parents go in the morning to let out their kids to go to school, where it backs up in traffic, like in every other school in the United States of America.
Right.
Well, it wasn't good enough. See, the Catholic Church says, build us barriers so that we could block off this stuff to traffic, so there's no danger of kids getting run over, which is really cool.
Right.
It would be cool in every school to have that, because there's always the danger of kids running out. Okay?
Right.
So they build this, and they build a little area at the city expense for them to block off the traffic. So what goes on in that little area on a nice sunny day today? They have prayer services. Out in that little area, in the city street, that the city built the barriers, they have prayer services. It's okay to pray. But doesn't this mix church and state? Isn't this crazy? Isn't this nuts?
There's a sure blurring of the lines there, yeah.
Oh, there's a blurring of the lines. And that's my big thing in life, Monty. I love the idea that you're getting rent control. I wish it would have come a little earlier, because I have many friends, one who's being affected right now, who his wife is retiring. Now they're going to have 2 retirement incomes, and they can't afford to live in Alameda anymore.
Right.
Quite simply. They worked hard all their lives. They lived here for some 30 years, and they're moving to a trailer park in Roseville, which is a cool place to go for some, but not for these people.
Right.
For a myriad of reasons.
Sorry.
They were forced into it. So, we did one. We got it on the ballot. I'm sure it's going to pass. Now what we got to do is go for the blurring of the line and get that thing, a distinguished thing where we have none of that. What do you suppose? There's a city in Alaska that did this, and that they just started taxing the churches, synagogues, and mosques.
Oh, my God.
They did it, and it can be done. It's a decision-making process that the local government can make. I want to do it. Find me, Monty, somebody with the guts, the chutzpah to put it together, a politician. It's not our man. I love Trish. She's been my Facebook friend long before she became mayor. I asked her in an interview before she became mayor, can we do this? She smiled and looked at me. That's not my bailiwick. She doesn't want to fight City Hall. She doesn't want to fight the powers that be. There is in this country what I call an unholy trinity. It's big business, government, and organized religion, and they all work together. And they're not doing right by us, we the people, because they work in cahoots with each other. So, and it's the preaching from the pulpit, the politicizing from the pulpit that really gets me, if you want to blur those lines. So I'm enlisting you in my program, Monty. You did great for the city of Alameda. Let's go on to bigger and better things. How about that?
All right, yeah. Well, I'm not much of a politician. I'd rather just spend my time writing. But this rent thing, I'm telling you, it got my attention, and the housing issue is
I
going to get worse.
You've done a tremendous job. I'm just joshing with you about the separation of church and state, as if it isn't serious.
Right.
But that was Jack Posset. I'm only serious. Years ago. Yeah. Monty, you're terrific. This has been a pleasure, and you are one of those Alameda heroes, and we need them.
Well, thank you.
That's great, and we thank you. And they're going to put a plaque up for you someday. Where would you like it put? Washington Park?
Oh, I don't know. You know, I'm just happy to help, and there's a lot of people. I'm involved with a wonderful organization, and I can't take credit for what the organization has done, but I take credit for what you've done individually. Now, there's a counting process. Do they go through a validation process before they put it on the ballot? Yeah, that's what's happening right now. The 30-day time frame has the clock is running.
Right.
And the county has 30 days. I guess it's the county. I think they go through and they compare our ballot signatures to the voter rolls, and they verify.
Monty, who's your biggest political ally through all of this, and conversely, who really comes up against tenants' rights?
Yeah, well, I guess you would say there's 2 or 3 organizations. There's
which politician helps you the most?
Yeah, I don't think any of them have helped us the most. Jim Odie's probably been more honest with us than anybody. Jim Odie, the council member.
Oh, yes.
Odie. I saw him when Mayor Spencer mentioned this business about the fixed-term lease, which is a loophole in the present ordinance. When she, started describing that this was, a way to get away from paying the relocation cost when you have a no-fault eviction. He just threw up his hands. He got red in the face, and that was an honest reaction. That I could see, that really hurt him. And he could not, I think for political reasons, come out really strong on our side. But he spoke, he listened, and he spoke, accurately, about the problem rather than from an ideological. He didn't just assume that rent control was bad. He was willing to listen.
Thought it through a little bit.
Yeah. Mayor Ashcraft is another one.
Who hurts you the most politically?
Oh, politically would be
would be Tony Desong. Would he?
Yeah, Desong. There's no question about that. He tried to water it down. It was a watered down version. The ordinance is a watered down version of what we needed from the beginning, and what we pushed for. And he wanted to water it down even further. In fact, I stood up in one of the city council meetings and called it hogwash what he was saying, because he was trying to water down something that was already being watered down. And he's even. What do you wish got included in it and wasn't watered down? What's the main thing that they watered down? Well, there's a number of things. First of all, they refused to eliminate the fixed-term lease loophole. That's huge. That's enormous. Right. And they 5%. They give landlords a free ride on the 5% increase. No questions asked. They can have a 5% increase, which is twice what they would get, more than twice what they would get under our charter amendment. Right. They have it's a tribunal. It's a tribunal of political appointees. You have to go before, basically to get your rights under the ordinance. Whereas in our case, it's not political appointees. It's an elected board.
Right.
And it's law. You don't have to go before them and plead. They just administer a law. It's in black and white, and this is law, and it has to be followed. But the landlords can go before in the current ordinance, they can go before this tribunal of appointees and plead their case for higher than 5%, and they can get it. No limit, basically, what they can ask for and get.
And the tenants have no say as to who sits on that board?
No, that's the mayor's decision. Now, the tenants could have someone apply to the mayor to be appointed. They might could recommend someone, you might say, but it's the mayor's decision.
Right.
As to who sits on that commission or committee. It's called a RAC, Rent Review and Advisory Committee. It's been around for 20 years. So,
Monty, was there ever a line drawn in the sand about a rent strike?
I didn't. I heard rumors of that, but I didn't. None of our people were talking about it. No.
Okay, just curious. Do you think it'll ever come to that?
I don't think so. I think we've got the answer right here, and I think it's going to get voted for and then put into law.
Beautiful. Is there anything that you could see that would queer the deal?
Oh, by some odd quirk, we got almost 8,000 signatures. That's 20% more than what we were required to get. We got the extra cushion because there's people who sign petitions who are not registered and who don't even live in Alameda. Sometimes they sign. So there's people who are unqualified who will be who have signed, but we just had no way of pre-screening them out.
And before you submitted it, did you have it notarized in any way?
Not notarized, but each of us has to each petitioner has to fill out a certification at the bottom, which states the date they did these signatures and where they were signed, and basically attesting that.
Okay. And that is a California law that.
There's an attestation at the bottom of each petition.
Okay.
So we have to sign.
Good. Because I'm just thinking if there's any way they can mess you out of it, they probably might. So
I would be very
cross the T's.
Yeah, I'd be very surprised if they do. We've done a good job of training people. All of our staff was trained, and before they went in the field, and we had attorneys and accountants and everybody else, in the field, like myself.
Yeah. William Rowan was one. Let's mention him.
Bill Rowan, absolutely, yeah.
Good guy, Bill.
Absolutely.
And mention some other names of people who...
Eric Strimling, April Squires, Choo Choo Charlie.
Choo Choo Charlie, right.
Yeah, and there's Tony, I can't say her last name, Nikki Posh, I don't know how to say her last name. It just goes on and on. Of course, Catherine Pauling was the leader. My gosh, I'm drawing a blank at the moment. I don't have a list of names in front of me.
Okay.
But
well,
it's upwards of almost 100 by the end. Gloria Rios was one, and Maria Dominguez was one. She's an attorney, or soon to be an attorney. She hasn't passed the bar yet. Maria Vela.
I haven't passed the bar either, as a matter of fact. Every chance I get. Actually, I'm not a drinker. But
that's a good
I play one on the radio sometimes, it seems. Hey, you're terrific. I hope you'll come back and be a guest at around Election Day, and we can inspire some folks to get out there and vote early and vote often.
Absolutely. We're going to be loud. We're meeting Saturday at the Fireman's Hall, 2:30 this Saturday, to celebrate, first of all, our victory, and then to make plans for the future. And there'll be a lot.
And celebrate, you must, because you really did a great job, and it's a surprise because talking to the way the flow of the city was going a couple of months ago, people never expected this to happen. So
no, of all places, Alameda. Can you believe it? And that just tells me that people didn't really know. Who were saying that didn't really know Alameda. You didn't not like I did. Vast majority of people here are really good people and
absolutely,
good-hearted.
That is the case. And but it's just like anywhere else. Sometimes the people that are good people have to stand up for themselves and each other, and that's cool that you're doing it.
I think people needed. We were persistent. We kept getting out there. We kept showing up, and showing our faces and reminding people that there was a problem. And just our presence, being there, was like a drumbeat, And people, I think we made them think and study the issue and ponder and come back and sign the petition. Right.
Well, I voted for it 11 times, so I know it's going to win. No, that's not true. Hey, listen, again, you're terrific, and I hope we do it again sometimes.
You're great. Glad to do it. Thanks.
All right. Be well. I'm going to close the show the way I do every one. I implore everybody out there to keep your dreams wet and your humor dry. Keep your children out of the offices of military recruiters and off the laps of clerics that wear dresses. Just to be on the safe side. You like that one?
Good one.
All right.
One of the things you mentioned, music, John Denver.
I'm going to put any music in. What would you like me to lead? How about John Denver? Do you like that?
Well, more than Denver, I guess you would say would be The Boxer by Simon and Garfunkel.
Ah, yeah. Paul Simon or Garfunkel, The Boxer. They're from Queens, New York.
Yeah.
When did you have actual in Texas? Were you exposed to people like Simon and Garfunkel, or was
Bob Dylan was another one. Yeah, and Tambourine Man. I played a lot of that stuff. When I have a guitar, I still pick around on it. So.
Oh, that's very cool. Very cool. Hey, I hope to meet you sometime in person, and we'll have a cup of coffee and shoot the breeze.
Great, I'd be delighted.
Okay, I'm glad you like my ending. It's the only one I have.
It's great.
Adios, everybody.
Okay.
Thanks again.
Thanks, Ralph. Okay, bye-bye.